The thing about it is, like, once it starts, you assume it's gonna reach absolute worst case scenario. And even then, I'm like, it's one thing to see a character get splattered. It's another when you hear the neck snap from strangling to impaling to everything else. And the thing that I've complimented about this show since they first brought it up early into the series is the concept of death in Delicious in Dungeon is wild, because you would normally want to say, well, there's no threat because they can always come back. But that's the great thing about this. Not always. If we rewind a few episodes back to that lake monster area, if the bodies would have fallen in there, there would have been no recovering that, most likely, with all the monsters and them getting ate. If there's no body, there's no coming back. If there's no healer, there's no coming back unless the cleaners and stuff are able to get to you, which isn't always the case. I mean, most likely, if everyone would have been wiped there, and Monster Falin and the Harpies continued, the bodies would have been ripped apart, ate, scavenged, and by the time something got there, it's entirely possible there would be nothing to revive. Potentially, there is. I mean, bodies do get taken back up to the surface to come back, but it's not guaranteed, so it's like, okay, well, shit. Because here's the thing, if there wasn't another healer, sure, we have Marcel, but, like, let's just imagine, like, there's only one healer, and they have to prioritize who to bring back. The rest have to be strategically placed in an area and hope the cleaners come get them or whatever, right? Like, or the little keepers, like the janitors, whatever they call themselves, right? Like, it's just, there's so many ways for it to go wrong, and even if it all works out, you're still witnessing these characters casually get squished down like they're made of butter. I assumed we were gonna fight Falin, but I thought at the end of the season. Full live reaction over on my Patreon. If you want to see my full uncut thoughts to the insanity that was this week's episode of Delicious in Dungeon, or any of these episodes, it's over there if you're interested. So I watch on Netflix, right? They had the little warning like, hey, there's slight nudity and this and that. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, has there ever been nudity in this show? I'm like trying to remember. I was like, I mean, I know Sensi got the cake on him, but I mean, is that really nudity? And then the Harpies come in. It's funny because it's like not even that intense. The most intense thing is actually how like things are just dying and getting splattered. I'm generally curious on people's opinion of Kabru this week, because Kabru is an interesting beast because he's like the foil, the polar opposite to Leos. And I wouldn't trust either one of them with the control of the dungeon, which seems to be what they're implying, that if you kill the dungeon master, you get control over the dungeon. Neither one of these two I would trust with that level of power. But when he initially jumped Falin, I had no anger in my heart. I said he was completely in the right. I think half the time the shit he says, I want to throw him off a cliff. I'm like, this dude just lives for chaos. But in that moment, there's no argument in my mind that can convince me he was wrong. She was a monster. She was this or that. The only thing technically wrong is I think what Leo said near the end was right, that, you know, if you kill her, then he'll just come and this and that. It's best to leave her so she can, you know, go away, and rather than having to deal with the dungeon master, rather than it just being, that's my sister. That was initially part of it, but Leo's makes sense. But in the moment, stabbing that fool was completely the logical call. And he went ham, man. Like, he was slicing, he was dicing. Doesn't seem like there's any vital organs on the human part of Falin. I assume it's in the more chimera part, like the bird part is probably where a lot of that shit is stored. Either way, though, like, that was insane. And I think an unexpected and probably going to be an underappreciated moment of the episode. It's kind of a twofold. The first of which is the fact that fucking Sensi, he did nothing but hold that plate of food this episode. When all this started, he was holding the food that he was trying to give to Shuro. And by the end of the episode, he's still holding that plate of food and then gives it to him. Everything that happened in this episode, including the brutality and sanity, he held onto that plate of food for dear life. That might be the greatest Sensi moment to date in this show, but I think one of the more unexpected moments that could go under the radar is how they handled Shiro's character. So, we kind of get the confirmation. It was kind of implied in previous episodes, but it's like, you know, 100% guarantee. Like, this dude was madly in love with Falin. And the idea of, like, having a wake-up call and just being like, on one hand, a wake-up call knowing that, like, he hasn't been eating, he hasn't been sleeping, and, you know, he needs to go back to the surface sort of a thing. But also that his friend's a lunatic. That he can so casually talk about, I eat monsters, look at these monsters, monsters this, monsters this, monster this, oh, we used black magic with a dragon to revive my sister. He's just infuriated because the guy already infuriated him naturally to begin with, and all that gets thrown on him. Yeah, that's gonna stress most people out, But it's really interesting how they, like, beat the shit out of each other and, like, come to terms with one another. On his parting gift, he gives that little bell to give a ring if he needs it. There was just something about that dynamic that I really enjoyed. And that's the thing about Leos' character, is he's such a nice guy, but boy, would he be infuriating to talk with. And, you know, when Shuro was kind of talking to Leos about how, like, you know, I gave you these hints that you annoy me or you piss me off, and any normal person, it's like, it kind of felt like, as someone who's dealt with people who've had extreme ADHD, slight autism and stuff, and they're completely functioning members of society, mind you, you wouldn't be able to tell naturally. You know, that barrier of communication where you're like, that should just be common sense or you should pick up on things, kind of hit home, because it's like, I've had similar conversations, and, you know, having to learn how to adjust for different people's communication styles can be infuriating, but if you care enough, you work through it. And it's just funny to see these two friends just completely butt heads, but still come out still appreciating each other. They actually kind of remind me of brothers. It's like they hate each other, but they still love each other at the end of the day, and they're there for each other if they need it. But it's like, why couldn't I have been born with any other damn brother, you idiot? Like, that's kind of the vibe I got from them. But insanity. I mean, this is what's great, is you look back to the dragon stuff and how intense it was, and then they found a way to kind of calm it down, and then they just escalate it to 11 again. That's what I love about this show, is that it can be a cooking show, it can be eldritch horror in the dungeon made in Abyss style, or it can be Sensi's whatever the hell Sensi's gonna do, because he's probably the biggest wild card in this show, but I absolutely love it. It's hard to say exactly where we go, but I do assume we are gonna have at least one more reunion with Falin before the end of this season, though obviously I'm not expecting the story to be completely wrapped up. But it'll be interesting because, like, a part of me kind of assumed that they might have killed Falin in this episode and then, like, you know, potentially tried to revive her again or something. But I kind of like the idea of her scurrying away and the justification for allowing that to happen. But the harpies and everything, man, like, everything was just splattering, and it just felt more brutal than normal. We've seen brutality in this world, but, like, this felt way worse than normal, both on the characters that we're following and the monsters they were fighting. It was just like, the best way to describe it, it felt like when you're driving in your vehicle and bugs hit your windshield and it splatters. That was this episode, and everyone was the bugs, the monsters and humans included. Let me know what you thought down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course, ring that bell so you get notified when I upload more. Like I mentioned, got those full live reactions over on my Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. Alright, so today we got Darthwin Wright, Magical, Eric Barton, The James, CR7, Jeff, Dawn, and we also have Chemist. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.